Welcome. I'm Glenn Anderson with the Olympia Fellowship of Reconciliation. For 28 years, this TV series has explored a wide variety of issues related to peace, social justice, economic justice, the environment, and nonviolent social change. We especially provide information that is rarely heard in mainstream media. This month, we'll examine the climate crisis in some interesting ways. The climate crisis is very serious and very urgent, but powerful economic and political forces want to avoid dealing with it. The problems can feel overwhelming, and we can easily feel powerless and despairing. So during this hour, besides summarizing the basic evidence and the scientific facts, we'll also consider why so many people have difficulty dealing with it and how to reduce the barriers to dealing with it. We'll propose several possible ways to get unstuck, both psychologically and in terms of public policy, so we can actually move ahead with solutions. To help us do that, we have two guests who are very savvy about the issue and who are very good at doing this kind of work. We have Kathy Cox, who's a psychotherapist and a spiritual director in Olympia with a special expertise in grief and loss. This approach can also help people grapple with difficult and often depressing issues such as the climate crisis. Before getting a master's degree in social work, she earned a bachelor's degree in zoology and chemistry, so she understands the science very well also. In the 1980s, she worked with a federal agency that was already working on the climate crisis. Our other guest is Stew Henderson. He is a conflict resolution consultant and a political activist who has spent 25 years helping organizations and communities tackle impossible problems, and emerge stronger, clearer, and more resilient. He's active with the Climate Reality Project, and that's the campaign founded by Al Gore to help communities all across the globe address the climate crisis. And also he participated in some of Olympia FOR's climate activities. So welcome, I'm glad both of you are here.
Thanks.
We'll have an interesting time, and I hope the viewers will benefit all from this. During the hour here, our approach to the climate crisis is, yes, it's a heavy issue, but it's something that we can actually deal with. And Kathy, I wonder if, as a psychotherapist, if you could maybe get us grounded in how to move into this.
Yeah, sure. So I've been familiar with the climate change issues for over 20 years, and yet I've been perplexed that up until recently, very few people have really been talking about it or doing much about it. And I started to think about why that might be happening, and it occurred to me that these issues are so big, you know, the idea of climate change and the potential end of the world as we know it is such a huge issue that it is overwhelming to people and invokes despair, sometimes anger, but it's so overwhelming, and I know that it was true for myself, that we tend to then hide. We tend to hide from it. We tend to check out or get numb, avoid it because it's so overwhelming. And through my own work, and we're going to talk more later about Joanna Macy's work, but through this work, if we find that if we are able to go toward the despair, toward the overwhelm, sit with it, usually with others, you know, that really helps. It allows us to move through that despair to a place of creativity, openness, yeah, really the ability to face this really overwhelming thing with eyes open, shoulder to shoulder.
Right, and that's the kind of approach you want to take in this TV program here.
Yes.
And you know, where we recognize the serious issues and grapple with it in an honest and realistic way.
Yeah.
So that's great. Stu, I'm glad that you brought a computer with that has some images that'll help people visually understand what's going on and explain the scientific realities that may otherwise be hard for people to see, but I know that you're able to explain things well and your images will help. Can you show us some information about global temperatures and some other things?
Yeah, and I'll finish up with that, but I'll first just a nod to the Climate Reality Project, which is I ended up doing this work. Well, as Kathy was saying, we've both been involved in this for many, many years, but recently was about a year and a half back now, got to go to a training out in Chicago by the Climate Reality Project. It was 1,500 of us there from all 50 states and 500 countries. It was quite a...
50 countries. 50.
Yeah, excuse me. 50 states, 50 countries.
Yeah.
All 500 countries. So the Climate Reality Project was the organization, and then, you know, and when people talk about this, maybe we can get to the slide. Yeah, this is a shot from outer space, one of our satellites looking at the globe turning. You know, when people talk about this as an issue of, you know, saving the planet, but, you know, really the planet's fine. You know, the planet's made of rock. The planet's not going anywhere, and life in some way is going to be here. The real question with climate is for humans. How are humans going to be there? And particularly our grandchildren. How are our grandchildren going to be? So when anyone talk about saving the planet, like, no, it's about saving our grandchildren's home. Let's stay focused. And the reason we have a problem, this is another shot from the International Space Station, is we think of the atmosphere as this broad thing that can never be harmed, but you can see here the atmosphere is actually very, very thin. You know, if we can drive for 5 miles and we're just as far as Nisqually, but if you could somehow go straight up 5 miles, you'd be out of the atmosphere. Yeah. And so the underlying kind of science of how climate change works is, you know, we get CO2 into the atmosphere.
Carbon dioxide.
Exactly, carbon dioxide.
Comes from burning fossil fuels. And
exactly. All the different fossil fuels that we have produced become and there are other greenhouse gases, but carbon dioxide is the one that we're most concerned about. It becomes like a giant blanket over the Earth. And trap some of the sun's heat. So when you get the CO2, you get heat, which ends up being both hotter air and hotter oceans. And one of the trickiest things in this is that when you get hotter air, you get more evaporation. And a lot of part of this whole one of the roots of the climate denial is people saying, well, you guys are just blaming everything on climate change. Hotter, more floods and more droughts. But actually, the increase in evaporation is why that happens. For every degree in increase of temperature of the atmosphere, the air can hold 7% more water vapor. So first of all, you've got, because of the hotter air, you've got heat waves, and we're seeing these all over the world. But because the more evaporation and more water vapor in there, you get worse storms.
Right.
So people are saying, well, we can argue about whether any storm was caused by global warming. There would have been a storm anyway, but they're all worse than they would have been otherwise. And it's even more so when those are storms like hurricanes or typhoons that go over the ocean, because when the water is hotter, it increases the storms.
Yeah, it picks up more water into it, and you have a stronger disturbance there.
And it takes the energy that energy from the hot water becomes the energy of the winds and the damage that takes place. Because when you get worse storms, you're going to get worse floodings. But the interesting part is that the evaporation, the same way that the water is absorbing more, evaporating more, the atmosphere is evaporating more water off of the oceans, it also evaporates more water off the land. And so you get more drought because the land is drying up faster than it used to.
Yeah.
You also get it with hotter air. There's rain. There's precipitation that would have fallen as snow, but now it falls as rain. So you get a reduced snowpack. And so in the summer, instead of having rivers that flow all year round because the snow is melting gradually over the summer, you don't have that, and the rivers run dry.
Yeah, and for those of us that rely on hydropower, we need the snow to fall in the mountains, and it'll stay there, and then it'll melt during the year and power the dams for electricity.
Exactly.
But if that falls as rain, it's gone, and then we don't have the snowpack that we need for the constant flow of electricity.
Exactly, and we see that here in places like India. All the major rivers there start out from snowpack and from glaciers in the Himalayas, and if those were to dry up in the summer, that's the water supply for a billion people.
Yeah.
Looking at some of the other consequences here, again, when there's more drought and hotter air, you end up getting more wildfires, which we're seeing not just here in this state, but all over the world. Hotter oceans are also causing rising sea levels, both from the fact that hotter water is a little bit, it expands to some degree, but more importantly because the Antarctic ice shelves are melting quicker than they would. So those are all the impacts of the heat, but also carbon dioxide directly impacts the ocean and causes ocean acidification, which harms the ability of shellfish to form their shells. It's already interfering with the oyster industry here in the state of Washington. They have to fly the oyster babies the oysters to Hawaii to form the seeds that they bring back then to grow here. But no one's taken the wild oysters out there. But actually, with ocean acidification, the entire food chain in the ocean is at risk. And then meanwhile here we're also looking at, because of all these changes, we're looking at habitat loss, we're looking at the spread of diseases. There's all sorts of tropical diseases that are now no longer in the tropics. West Nile in Washington, it used to be safely in the Nile, but in dengue fever, many of these other tropical diseases are spreading north and south. We have crop loss, billions of dollars of damage from crops being lost, water shortages as we're seeing in California, and all of these having economic costs. So you see this whole array of things, and it's kind of depressing.
Yeah.
And part of what happens is people talk about the climate crisis as something for the future, but it's happening now, and this is with even just the minimal increase. So we're at what, 0.8 of a degree?
Just 0.8
Celsius centigrade, which is 1 and a fraction Fahrenheit, and they talk about like going up to 2 degrees Celsius, more than twice what we've got now, as the upper limit of what's safe, and that's not safe. We're already beyond what's safe.
The 2 degrees Celsius that was chosen for political reasons, not scientific reasons. Even that is dangerous, and we're going to have a hard time even meeting that level.
Yeah, because we're already having these things now, and imagine if it gets more than twice as bad as it is now.
Right.
It's a serious thing.
Right. I would like to show one last shot here, just because it's a beautiful piece from NASA, from the NASA Goddard Space Flight Center. I'm going to pause this a second here. So this, what this is showing, it started in 1884, showing as you can see, the average temperature between 1951 and 1980 shows up as white, and the blue is colder, and the yellow and the red is hotter.
Than average.
Than average, yeah. And so these are these are global temperatures ever since we've been taking we had measurements taken all over the world, and you can see as as it goes through here, we're up to 1918 now. I'll start it over, but you can see that temperatures go up and down. They rise and they fall, and it's what we're used to. That things sometimes it's warmer, sometimes it's colder, and you could see 1907, 1910, 1920. There's very normal variations and changes. 1930, 1940.
But it's getting pretty yellow there.
Well, it starts to get 1950, 1960,
Yeah.
70. It's worse. 1980, 1990, 2000, and then up into 2013.
Yeah.
It's just kind of it's a and as you said, this is just on the way. This is just as we're barely beginning to get into this heat.
And I think people also need to not be confused about what the concept of global warming means. The global warming is an average warming, but because it's really climate disruption,
right,
for the reasons that you mentioned in your previous diagram there. And so when you mess with the jet stream, you're going to move somebody's weather to somebody else, and you're going to get more droughts and more rain. You're going to get heat waves and severe cold because you're disrupting things. And on the average, it's warmer, but overall, it's just severe disruption.
Yes, the disruption's the bigger problem. Like you said, the extreme cold temperatures that we're seeing all across the Midwest over the last couple of years were because that cold mass that was there used to be up in the North Pole.
Right.
But because temperatures are warming more extremely at the North Pole, and the perturbations, the changes in the jet stream, we end up getting very much abnormally cold weather down.
Yeah. So instead of letting somebody fool you into thinking that these extreme colds or extreme snowstorms disprove the global warming, it's actually evidence. It's more evidence if you understand the science, but I think a lot of people don't want to understand the science, and we'll talk about that later on the program too.
Well, I also heard a great little illustration that the difference between weather and climate, that when you're out walking a dog on a long leash, the dog is running all around here and running up and down and going here and there, and you're walking safely along the path. The dog is the weather, and you're the climate.
Yeah.
And the climate is steadily, but the climate is steadily getting
it's the overall pattern as opposed to day-to-day weather stuff. Yeah.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of misinformation out there, and if we can settle that down, I think the viewers can be better off than before. You mentioned already the greenhouse gas. I don't know if you used the term greenhouse gas, but you talked about it's like having a blanket when you have the
atmosphere
CO2 is trapped, and it's like, I think the viewers, if you have a basic handle on the science, when you burn something, you end up with whatever comes out of burning it. In this case, with oil or wood or coal, you end up with carbon, because these are carbon based.
Right. So
people talk about the issue of carbon and carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and the greenhouse gas term is because the atmosphere functions like a greenhouse that
reflects.
The heat stays trapped here, like a greenhouse is warm instead of being released into space, and so that's what's messing with things, and we need to limit the greenhouse gases. And you talked about when we were on the phone to prepare for the program, you talked about China is discovering, because they've been doing so much coal burning and oil burning, and all of a sudden they've got problems. Tell us what you mentioned on the phone about China recognizing their problems.
Well, yeah. I mean, right now in the northern part of China, life expectancies have already been reduced by an average of 5 years because of respiratory problems, primarily caused by burning coal. And so, there are attacks saying, "Oh, China's not doing anything," but in fact, they're shifting and they're starting to do quite a bit. And they're seeing, their government obviously is not as responsive as ours is, but they actually have a better. They've got a cap and trade system over there that they're beginning to experiment with, and so they're putting a price on carbon ahead of us, and are actually working. They have plans to install over the next few dozen or so years, install as much renewable energy as the United States has total energy infrastructure right now. So they're actually moving forward very quickly.
Yeah. So there are some social costs besides the health costs you mentioned in China. Are there other social costs you might mention about any aspect of this?
Well, there's that's why we talk about having a price on carbon, because carbon is putting a price on all of this. The damage that's done by storms is part of the price of carbon. The areas that are destroyed by wildfire, the areas that are destroyed by flooding, the health impacts. The American Lung Association is very involved in these issues, because big impacts on asthma and other health challenges.
Yeah. Well, and the oil refineries are very often put in low-income and minority areas down around Houston and southern Louisiana and stuff, and so there are whole cancer epidemic areas near these refineries and things, and that's part of the cost, really.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
There's also we've learning that many of the poorest countries in the world are being and will be most affected by some of the weather and drought, which affects the ability to grow food.
Well, and in the big rally in New York that was held recently, we had lots of involvement from the African American community, from other people of color, because people are recognizing these climate justice issues, that a lot of the problems are negatively impacting more low-income communities first.
Yeah, in Appalachia, where there's a lot of coal mining, they'll remove entire mountaintops to get the coal, and they dump all that stuff in the streams. They kill off the fish, they destroy the ecosystems, and those are poor rural neighborhoods in Appalachia.
Right.
Those are not in the rich people's part of the suburbs where that coal mining waste is dumped.
Well, and right here in Seattle, there's concern again that some of the most low-income communities are along the highways, and even just at the highways are being because of the fossil fuel use. Kids have higher levels of problems associated with it.
Right. So we have, despite all this stuff that we know, there are people out there who are denying that the climate crisis is a problem, or if they admit that, the climate is changing, but people aren't causing it. And so, what can you tell us about the whole denier phenomenon? Well, what do people need to know about that?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. It's not a worldwide phenomenon, first of all. It exists in 3 countries. Australia, the United States, and Great Britain, because the advertising companies, which are being paid for by the fossil fuel companies, it really is a manufactured issue. One way you can see that is that the story keeps changing. First it was, well, there isn't really, it's not really happening. When the science just mounted and mounted and mounted until that was irrefutable, then people started saying, oh no, it's it's not human caused. Well, and then the science mounted and mounted to demonstrate that, and people, it keeps shifting, as the things that get thrown out get knocked down. I actually saw recently someone saying that it's starting to get tested out there that well, no, you can't prove that carbon dioxide raises temperatures. When this is something that scientists have known since the early 1800s. I mean, this is basic stuff.
It seems like part of their strategy is to keep people from concluding what's actually true by saying, well, we're skeptical, or it's not, their science is undecided. It's like what the tobacco companies did in the 1950s and 60s, saying, well, we don't really know that smoking is bad for you. The science isn't quite settled on this yet. And it turned out that the few scientists or doctors that were saying that were on the payroll of the tobacco companies, and we're seeing this with oil and coal.
Well, yes, because what they realized is they didn't have to prove what they were saying. They just had to create some doubt.
And that's the strategy.
Well, it is so much strategy. It is, in fact, the very same companies that were employed by the tobacco industry are now being employed by the fossil fuel industry. And some of the very same individuals coming up with these same, what can we come up with now that will just confuse people and don't, it's like a magician, distracting you from the hand that's hiding the cards.
Right. Yes, exactly.
They don't have to do it. They just have to make you think it's happening.
Right, and I think that's where it hooks in with our the psychological piece of facing the potential devastation of climate change. Makes us want to hide from that, and that's where I think sometimes these folks are able to hook into, just have us have enough of a doubt. Maybe it's not true, and so I can just push it aside because it's so overwhelming. We don't want to go where that.
Who wants to believe that all these problems are there? We're all looking. I mean, I'm looking for something that would make this go away.
It's totally hooking into human nature.
So is it something like if somebody feels like maybe they have a certain kind of disease, but they don't want to go to the doctor to find out if they actually do.
Exactly, and
it's
then
as long as I don't go to the doctor,
I don't have it.
I don't have this.
And as long as I can keep it kind of fuzzy that that global warming is happening, then maybe it's not. And I can keep going on my merry way.
But the controversy is really polarized, even though there's a virtual consensus of science on one side, and then these other propagandists on another side, plus people who are hurting and don't want to be confronted with the reality of it. But it's polarization. What can you tell us about that kind of polarized situation based on your professional experience dealing with people who are suffering emotional crises and grief and loss? Is there anything else besides what we've said?
I think you had something to say about the polarization.
Well, I mean, I just think the polarization is unfortunate, because these are really things we should be engaging and connecting about, and instead, both sides tend to see each other as caricatures and become caricatures, and it keeps us from really engaging and really doing something.
That's a really good point. I would say, in my family, I have people who see the climate change issues as very differently than I do, and I know that that they're good people, and that they're thinking that they're just dealing with it. Well, they're just in denial about it, because it's so overwhelming. And so I think that's really what happens.
So you can distinguish between somebody's deficient reasoning versus blaming them for having like a character flaw or something. I think sometimes folks who are concerned about the climate, or folks who care about peace, or folks who whatever the good issue is, tend to disparage people on the other side in ways that are kind of unfair and attacking them as people. And we need to recognize when we do that, because that's not really helping us. We shouldn't be piling on in that way. We should help people get liberated, but not vilify them as people, as so often folks on each side do.
Right. Well, I mean, that was one of the deep reasons why Gandhi and Dr. King talked about nonviolence. It was a big part of that, was to these people on the other side are not the enemy. The system that we're all trapped in is the enemy.
Right, and that's very, very basic to the sense of nonviolence, and certainly Gandhi and King and other nonviolent practitioners have that sense. I mean, we have a choice in this matter. I mean, this is one of the things that sometimes folks on each side don't do. You have people on one side that says it's not a problem, or there's nothing we can do about it, or whatever, and then people on the environmental side will say, "Oh, holy crap, we're all doomed," and it's too late, and we should just give up and cave in and I don't know what, do something else. We'll talk a bit about the recognizing feelings of despair and powerlessness, but while we're talking about the scientific realities, I want to just check in a bit about the actual damage. You told me on the phone when we were preparing for the program that it's too late to solve the actual damage that has already been caused by this, but it's not too late to prevent the worst damage that would happen if we don't act boldly now. Can you flesh that out a bit?
Yeah, because as you said, there's a lot of folks who will say, well, yeah, it's it is too late. There's no sense trying to do anything. Let's just ride this thing out.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a good approach because while it is too late for some things, some damage has already gotten done, and there's some damage also is what they use the term baked into the system right now. We could stop burning fossil fuels tomorrow, and more damage would still happen.
Right. There's a lag time in the atmosphere between the damage that's caused and the damage that results from that fossil fuel burning. It's quite a lag time.
Right.
And so the damage to the environment or the damage to the climate that we're experiencing now is based on when we drove our cars 10, 20 years ago, or whatever.
So there's worse to come.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to. We don't have to put civilization at risk, and we don't have to put the survival of humanity at risk. There is still time to avoid the most catastrophic problems that could befall us. But we have to start changing course. We have to start acting. And there's some great news about that and a lot of hopefulness, which again we'll get to down the line here. But it is critical that we do act and that we do try to avert as much damage as we can.
Yeah, it's like the medical ethics for doctors, where it says first do no harm, don't make things worse.
Right.
And that's where we need to go. For now is, okay, we've done all this stuff in the past we're starting to suffer the consequences, but we can remedy that by not making things worse. Right. Start turning things around now.
Right.
So, I've been volunteering for the peace movement, as you know, since the 1960s, and the world has always been in trouble. I mean, all kinds of serious troubles.
And long before the 60s,
and
the
before
world was
then
always
too. But I was involved.
The more you read about history.
Yeah. And in the 80s, when Joanna Macy, who we'll talk about some more in the program, was doing her workshops on despair and empowerment in the nuclear age. In the 80s, when President Reagan was doing this massive buildup of nuclear weapons and saying these really horrible, provocative things in the Soviet Union, a lot of people are saying, holy crap, we're going to have a nuclear war, we're all doomed, And then some people would ask me, do you think we're doomed? Do you think, there's a chance that we can prevent this? And I would usually say, well, tell me what you think. And if somebody said, yeah, we're all doomed, there's, nothing we can do about it, well, then that was one bit of data, one data point saying, yeah, we really are doomed. But if somebody said, no, I think we can still turn things around if we educate people, if we push on the government, if we lift up people's consciousness and spirits and inform people and stuff, we can turn things around, then we're not doomed. So the result was, it really is all up for grabs. We can decide.
Right.
And if you give up, then we are cooked.
Right.
But if we say, no, darn it, I'm going to turn these things around, then we can change it.
Right.
And that's how I approach the nuclear weapons and the climate work I'm doing now. And
the science is with you on that in terms of the climate.
That's right. I mean, it's nice when the truth is on our side.
Yes.
But we really have to make that choice, and that's kind of where I'm coming at on this program and how the three of us develop the content for this program.
Well, and I think that leads right into
it does.
Kathy's
story.
Yeah.
I came to this. I'm trying to think how to start. So there is the piece of the more that we do, the more that we're going to forestall worse things happening. But the truth is, we actually don't know for sure what's going to happen. You know, so that is part of it. That is part of it. We have hope, and there's a lot of good reasons for hope, way more than I knew until recently, and that's very inspiring. And we'll get more into that. But there is a certain unknown, just like in the nuclear proliferation period, we didn't know if we were going to make it. You know, and some of us hid under rocks. Then kind of this is too much, and others kept putting one foot in front of the other and acting anyway. And so let me tell a story about my own because I think it may speak to other people. So I've known, as I said, that global warming was going on for at least 25 years, and I knew about it on the fringes. I would read things here and there, but I even when it wasn't in the news, which hasn't been much until relatively recently, I knew it existed, and I would go through. But I went through my day basically mostly ignoring it, mostly pushing it to the side. Periodically, though, I would find myself standing in front of my kitchen sink with the hot water on, going, I wonder if there'll be a time that I'll even have any hot water. And then I would just, maybe we won't have the fuel to do it, or maybe I won't be able to live in this house. Maybe our living situation will be so changed that we'll be scrabbling for food, in the back, wherever we could find it. But I would feel that open up, get really overwhelmed, and then shut it down again. Or I would be driving the car and thinking, how long am I going to be driving a car? Is this going to go on for much longer? And then I would shut it down really quick. And I would look up at Mount Rainier, and look at the snow up there, and have the momentary thought of like, is there going to be a time when I look up there, or my children are going to look up there and not see any snow? And I would just feel such pain, such fear and pain that I couldn't tolerate it, and I would just shut that back down again. And until one day, a few years ago, I just kept open to the pain, and I just ended up crying and crying and crying, and came out the other side. I was very afraid, very feeling hopeless, and I still had my eyes open. And there was something about that. It reminded me of the Joanna Macy's work that I'd studied so many years before, of where she, in the nuclear age, talked about, and that she's now applying also to climate change, that the despair and the overwhelm that we experience is normal. It's understandable in the face of the end of our world as we know it, and that it is also normal that we try to hide from it. We hide from it through, in our country, shopping, watching TV, playing games, doing,
gambling,
keeping
drugs,
busy,
alcohol,
gambling, drugs,
all the things
any of the addictions.
TV, all the things that people are doing every night.
any of the addiction stuff, and any kind eating, and just to kind of hold it at bay, but underneath, because we believe that we can't stand it. We believe that we will not, if we were to feel that level of pain and fear, that level of pain and fear, that we would not be able to survive it. Right. And, but turns out that, and this is Joanna's wisdom, is that if we are able to just be with that despair and pain and fear and overwhelm, stay with it alongside action, rather than, what we tend to do that, like I said, is shut down and then we don't take any action. And some people will say, actually, that it's hopeless and so there's no use taking action, but having the feelings and also taking action right next to each other. So you have the despair and the empowerment, you know, that right next to each other allows us to be awake, allows us to open up to this creative energy in ourselves, allows us actually to connect with each other, because that pain and fear and overwhelm is so isolating. I mean, really, I never told anybody until recently the stories. You know, I would just feel them and then shut back down again. And I can't imagine I'm the only one that's been feeling that way, you know.
Right.
So there's something about sharing our fear and sharing what we want and showing up anyway, taking steps to make the world, you know, to do this. And what Joanna Macy does say is, it's all the more powerful in the face of not knowing what's going to happen. You know, because
More courage.
it takes courage, and it does take courage. Yeah.
So during the 80s, when the nuclear weapons thing was causing this, and she wrote this book called Despair and Personal Power in the Nuclear Age, and it had exercises that she was using in, workshop exercises, interactive small group processes that people could do to actually do just what you're saying, and other variations of that, so that people could feel that stuff in a small, safe setting with other people going through the same thing, and come out the other end with some sense of empowerment. And yes, we can do something about that. So I just recommend to anybody who's watching the show that hasn't read that or figured out these kind of workshop small group activities, Despair and Personal Power in the Nuclear Age was the book.
And she has a couple.
She has some more recent books as well, and there are actually several people in the Olympia area who have done that work with her and can help people.
Right.
Do some of that work.
She did a workshop that both of you went to at late May of 2014, and I said, we got to do a TV program on this, because it's so relevant, so needful. I mean, we really need to do this kind of stuff. And so I encourage, and people can do an internet search. Joanna Macy, M-A-C-E-Y, or M-A-C-Y, no E in there. And it's just great stuff.
She's a wise
I think
woman.
we really need to do that if we're going to fix things. So besides that approach, which is kind of a hinge toward, yes, let's do things about it, because activism is also a remedy for that kind of despair.
Right,
you know?
right.
Don't be immobilized. Get out and do something and be part of it.
It's hard to change the world from the fetal position.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Commonly said.
So, but now you've done a lot of work on these issues, Stu, and let's talk about choosing to convert from carbon-based fossil fuels to renewable energy. You told me on the phone when we were preparing for the show that you could think about our economy as like a giant machine that needs to be plugged into one source of energy or another, and you want us to choose.
Yeah. It's like the machine of our economy is now plugged into this fossil fuel generating, energy generating machine, and somehow we got to unplug it from that and plug it into the renewable energy energy machine. And the good news is. We are doing that. We're moving quickly on that. And it's happening sooner than we think. Actually, I can show you a couple slides
show us,
here.
And if we can move through, we got a lot more content to cover, and rapidly reducing time. Just like that's the message of our climate crisis. Time's a wasted.
This one graph here is probably the most important one for moving forward, which is the cost of photovoltaic power, which is over time dropping drastically, so that there are now and production is going through the roof. That's what we call the hockey stick curve. So rapidly improving production, and so we're hitting something called grid parity. Already by 2012, there were several countries in the world where photovoltaic power, solar power, was cheaper than coal. And cheaper than natural gas, and the number of places where that's taking place is spreading all across the world over this next decade. So this is a map of proposed new U.S. coal plants from 2002 to 2008. Kind of depressing, but then you see the ones that have been canceled. And it's really encouraging, and that's what's going on. We really are making this shift from this old dirty energy to this new energy. But it's like, but right now, you know, it seems like it's a little cheaper to stay plugged into that dirty energy generator.
Yeah.
But it's because we aren't paying, as we mentioned earlier, we aren't paying the real cost of carbon. We aren't paying the real cost of what that damage that's doing to us. And if we were paying the real cost, we would switch over faster.
Right. It's like sweatshops or like Walmart, you know, where they underpay the workers, and then when you apply for a job, they say, oh, here's how to apply for food stamps or something. And I mean, so the taxpayers end up paying part of the cost.
Healthcare.
So
Right.
yeah, healthcare and stuff. So these sweatshops and unscrupulous employers are actually externalizing their costs and making other people pay what they should be paying in fair wages, but they're not.
Right. We're actually subsidizing the use of fossil fuels and have been all over the world.
Right. So tell us about how to use market forces, which a lot of people worship as how to get things done, is let the market decide. And if we get rid of the subsidies and actually put a price on carbon, which you've already mentioned earlier in this interview here, tell us about putting a price on carbon and how market forces can shift.
Well, yeah. I mean, most people in this country and really around the world who are trying to solve this problem are really seeing that's a key to this, is putting a price on carbon. So there's thousands of companies that internally put a price on their carbon, so they can be making wiser decisions. Mm-hmm. Even some of the fossil fuel companies actually do this, and a number of 30-some countries or regions within countries are also doing this. Some places it's a carbon tax. Some places it's cap and trade. You can get all kinds of obscure intellectual arguments about what's better. Anything that puts a price on carbon makes things better, because we can start to make basically renewable energy becomes more obviously the way to go.
Yeah, British Columbia, Canada, put a price on carbon. They have a carbon tax that's been wildly successful and popular. Some of the proposals I've seen would rebate to people your per capita. Mm-hmm. You know, everybody gets a fair shake out of this, but the people who are paying are the ones who are wasting carbon, using the most stuff. And whether it's at the wellhead or at the coal mine or at the whatever, however it's done, you know,
Right.
that can be figured out. But the point is, if you live economically, you're not paying much in, but you're getting the rebate. So there's a way of being revenue neutral. Some people promoting a carbon tax want it to be revenue neutral, so it's not like this is a way for the government to suck money out of us, but it's just a way of redistributing from those who use more than their fair share toward, redistributing it to the general public.
And Governor Inslee had a carbon emissions reduction task force, which actually had people from the environmental movement and the healthcare and private industry who really made recommendations about how this state should proceed with that. As we're doing this taping, the governor is a week away that he's going to make his announcement. But by the time this is airing in January 2015, those proposals are going to be in front of the legislature, and there's going to be something there that, if folks who want to get involved and want to be making a difference, anything that puts a price on carbon, that makes carbon pay its fair share, is going to accelerate things going in the right direction.
Yeah, that's the approach, is make them pay their fair share, because right now they're getting subsidized, and if they had to pay their fair share, then the market forces could kick in and we can make some progress. And there are a lot of proposals out there, and without getting into the pros and cons of various ones, pay attention. But different nonprofit organizations that are working on the climate crisis are putting out different kinds of ideas. So there are a lot of sources of information out there.
Yeah, and by I like the idea of relying on the market, because if it's cheaper to use the fossil fuel, then we don't, well, it's maybe bad, but it's cheaper. So many of us we're gonna do the cheaper thing. But as soon as solar power is cheaper than coal, everyone's going to switch over. We're not going to have to persuade anybody of anything. It's just going to happen. We're just trying to bring that day quicker.
Yeah. Is there anything else we want to say about why each of you cares about this? We've covered some of this. Mm-hmm. Is there anything about why you care about this that we haven't yet said?
Well, I know I testified a couple of years ago in front of the EPA when they were looking at their regulations around greenhouse gas, around carbon dioxide emissions from power plants. And what I said to them was, the most important, my whole world changed when my first son was born. I remember we drove home. It was a Sunday morning, and we drove home, and I was sure that I would look forward on Sunday morning to read the Washington Post. We lived in Washington, D.C. at the time, and I was sure that morning driving home, the headlines are going to be, "Nat is born," because that was the most important thing in the world.
Yeah.
And it turned out that wasn't what the paper said, but I realized the paper was wrong.
Another screw up by the mainstream press.
But it helped me detach from the world, because I realized that from the news machine, because I knew what was really important that day. Yeah. And being a father became the central thing in my life. It really still is, but my kids are grown and out of the home now. And what I told the EPA was, I've organized for the last 18 years just around being a father and taking care of these boys, and I can't take care of them anymore. Now we can. We as a society can, but we have to take responsibility for this. We have to do something about this. I can't be a good father and hopefully someday a grandfather if I'm not taking action on this and making sure that we move forward and, as I said at the beginning, deliver to our grandchildren the home that they deserve to have, the garden that they deserve to enjoy, and not a wasteland that we've created from being wasteful and inattentive to what was really going on.
Yeah. And I love this earth, and I love this earth, and it's a great place. And I want it to be hospitable as it has been to me, to the future generations. And my piece, I think everybody has a piece to play here. There are people that are developing the photovoltaic cells, and there are people that are doing the political piece. And I want to really encourage people to step up courageously in the way that they can, the unique gifts that they can bring to this, to save this earth for our children, grandchildren. Yeah.
Well, one of the things I think that's fun and exciting in working on this is that there are so many different constituencies who have an inherent interest in working with us to fix the climate, but that we might not have already thought about as environmentalists and stuff.
Yeah.
There are people with asthma or other respiratory problems who would benefit by getting smog out of the air, who don't want to have coal dust coming off of coal trains running through our towns. There are insurance companies that don't want to have to pay out for flood damage and rising sea level that's going to inundate waterfront homes.
The insurance companies,
rich people.
The industry, the insurance companies are the one industry in the world that's the most active preventing climate change, because they're the ones seeing the bills.
And so for most of us who think of ourselves as politically left, we have a long heritage of disliking insurance companies, but those are allies. Right. And in the late summer of 2014, there's a convergence in Washington, D.C. of the Cowboys and Indians Coalition, where the ranchers who have a strong interest in protecting their lands and their cattle and their water supplies and everything from various kinds of climate and oil company and fracking damage and so forth, linked up with the Indians, who have a long-standing commitment to protecting this space. And so they had the Cowboys and Indians Coalition that rode together into Washington, D.C. and lobbied the heck out of Congress to turn things around. So there are a lot of allies in here that we wouldn't expect. And so I would encourage people watching the program to think about who else has an interest in this, that might not be one of the usual suspects.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of potential. I think,
Well,
to work on this.
and at the large scale, the international community is really moving on this. There's, we've seen sort of failure after failure at these large, these large gatherings, but just things are shifting now, and I think we're going to see very different things in Lima and in Paris over the next couple of years.
Right, and local governments are doing things. Here in Thurston County, we have the Thurston Climate Action Team that does good work with especially local governments and also the private sector. You've done work helping governments turn around on this. I mean, I should give the website for the Thurston Climate Action Team. It's a kind of a hard one, but you can write it down from the screen, from the TV screen. oly.us/ThurstonClimateAction.org is where they're at.
And I think there's, we really are ground zero for government action on this. Governor Inslee is really doing some, the proposals that he's going to have for the legislature and that he's going to be doing through the administration are as forward thinking as anything that's being done in the country.
Right, and so people in Washington have that to work on. Oregonians have a governor who cares about this.
He said no coal exports.
So, and I encourage people to work with their local climate groups, their environmental groups, and so forth. And it's like any of the other good issues where it's ordinary people who turn things around because the vested interests on top are so much hooked into the status quo that it's pressure from below that can change things.
Right.
Well, and also, like we look back on the civil rights movement and say, oh, that, what a great victory that was. But the history of the civil rights movement of any of these progressive movements has been you lose and 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 then you win.
Right.
And if people had given up and gotten disappointed with that string of losses, we wouldn't be where we are today. But people kept on moving through those, and each one of those defeats, like the ones we've seen on climate, is moving us to the day when it's a win.
Well, the movement in the U.S. for women's right to vote took more than 70 years. The first conference among women urging the right to vote was, I think, 1848 or something, and they didn't get it until about 1920, and they were just at it.
And it was a crazy idea, and it was God was against it when it came out. Like every other good idea, it's crazy and God's against it. And then we start to realize, oh, maybe there's more to this than we thought.
We're rapidly running out of time. I want to let the viewers know that we have a great local group in Olympia working on this. It's the Olympia Fellowship of Reconciliation has a working group called Confronting the Climate Crisis, and we've been working on this since about August of 2012. We meet third Wednesday of each month at 6:30 p.m. at the Olympia Center, 222 Columbia Street Northwest, downtown. We have several subcommittees that are working concurrently in different strategically useful ways. We urge you to contact the chair of our climate committee, Bortai Hargrove, at 360-352-6327. You can email her at climate@olympiafor.org. And you can see on your screen the very long website reference for our climate group. There's the climate crisis part of our website being www.olympiafor.org, and then click climate crisis, and you get to what it shows on the screen there. So that's a resource, and we have other resources listed there, lots of information. Joanna Macy's work is a resource for books and videos and articles.
Well, the fellowship, Bortai is a big hero, and your group has been doing amazing stuff. We also have Climate Solutions right here, 350.org. There's all kinds of ways that people can plug in, and we need everybody to plug in because.
Different groups have their own different specialties or their own focus or their own strategies. And altogether, it's cumulative, and we're all in touch with each other. So it's not like this group competing against that. It's like we've carved out different parts.
Hand in hand.
A lot of teamwork.
Shoulder to shoulder.
Yes.
Changing the world.
Yeah. So I want to thank our two guests, Kathy Cox and Stew Henderson. I had a good time talking with you.
Thank you.
And I want to thank all the folks who are watching and the folks who are not watching who've been working on this, trying to prevent our climate from being damaged further. The science has been solid for quite a long time. The scientists are really in consensus about this, And the best scientific facts can be explained in ways that ordinary folks, including kids, can easily understand. We need to organize to stop the destructive forces from impeding our progress. And we have to work on the psychological aspects and spiritual aspects that are
Yes.
holding people back from living up to their potential as co-creators of a healthier world for all of us.
Well put.
Yeah.
So I appreciate what you folks have been doing. I appreciate what other folks have been doing. You can get information about a wide variety of issues related to peace, social justice, and nonviolence through the Olympia FOR. Visit our website, olympiafor.org. Our phone is at 360-491-9093. We're all one human family. We all share one planet. We can create a better world, but we all have to work at it. And the world needs exactly what you have to offer. Thanks.